In April 2023, an Oregon man was cleaning out his late uncle's attic when he found something strange. A rusted green military box tucked behind old camping gear and waterlogged newspapers. He almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of him. Inside was a skull, wrapped in faded cloth, teeth intact, no jaw, just a handwritten label, TP 1983. Police were called immediately. Forensic testing followed, and after weeks of quiet investigation, the result came back. The skull belonged to a woman who vanished 40 years ago, a woman named Teresa Peroni, a 19-year-old college student from Eugene, Oregon, who disappeared without a trace during the summer of 1983. Her family had buried an empty casket. They held candlelight vigils every year. For decades, she was just another missing person. No body, no suspect, no justice. Until that box, and what unraveled after its discovery would reveal a chilling trail of manipulation, betrayal, and a suspect living freely, right under everyone's nose. This isn't just a cold case reopened. It's a dark secret that was carefully hidden for 4 decades. And almost stayed that way. Stay with us. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about how people vanish and how evil hides in plain sight. Teresa Peroni wasn't the kind of girl who went unnoticed. At 19, she was majoring in psychology at the University of Oregon. Long auburn hair, big laugh, lived off iced coffee and sticky notes. Her dorm walls were plastered with motivational quotes and quirky doodles. Friends say she was sharp, a little sarcastic, always the first to spot when someone was lying. Maybe that's what got her into trouble. The summer of 1983 was supposed to be her reset. She stayed on campus to take a summer course, worked part-time at a bookstore, and planned weekend hikes near Mount Pisgah. Her roommate left for home in June. So for a few weeks, Teresa had the dorm to herself. On July 12th, she clocked out of work at 6 p.m. She stopped at a gas station just outside campus. Surveillance caught her smiling and chatting with the clerk. Then, nothing. She never made it back to her room, never called her parents. Her car? Found 2 days later, parked neatly in a residential cul-de-sac 5 miles away. Doors locked, purse inside, keys missing. At first, police thought she ran away. Maybe stress, maybe boyfriend drama. But Teresa's family pushed back hard. She'd just mailed a birthday card to her younger brother. Inside, a note. "See you next week for cake." Running away didn't make sense. And soon, neither did the case. 3 days after Teresa's disappearance, an elderly woman named Louise Chapman called the Eugene Police Department. She lived just a few houses down from where Teresa's car was found. Louise said she saw something that night, something odd. At around 10:30 p.m., she'd been taking out the trash when a car pulled into the cul-de-sac slowly, headlights off. She thought it might have been kids playing around, but when she peeked out again, she saw a man walking away from the driver's side, alone. Louise described him as tall, late 30s, wearing a light jacket and baseball cap. She didn't see the man's face. The police took down her statement, and then, according to the official report, they had no reason to believe it was connected to Teresa's case. It was dismissed. Why? Because by that point, investigators were operating under the assumption that Teresa left on her own. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Her credit cards hadn't been used. There was no immediate crime scene, just silence. But in hindsight, that moment should have been a red flag. The man Louise saw was never identified. And the more police overlooked early leads, the colder the trail became. Behind the scenes, something darker was unfolding. The person responsible didn't just want to hide Teresa, they wanted to erase her. And disturbingly, they were succeeding. In 1984, nearly a year after Teresa vanished, the case had stalled, but whispers in the neighborhood never stopped. One name kept resurfacing, Daniel Rooker. Daniel lived just 2 houses away from where Teresa's car had been found. On the surface, he was quiet, worked in maintenance at the local college, kept to himself. But people noticed strange behavior. He'd walk the neighborhood at odd hours. He had a reputation for watching women, not speaking, just watching. And after Teresa's disappearance, he changed. He started burning things in his backyard: a mattress, carpet, boxes. When neighbors asked why, he claimed he was clearing out old junk. There was no warrant, no probable cause. But years later, in 2002, a retired detective re-examining the case uncovered a troubling detail. Daniel had been questioned during the original investigation, twice, and both times his answers were off. He claimed he didn't know Teresa. Then in the second interview, he said she seemed like the type to run off. That phrase stuck with the detective. Why assume she ran off? And more importantly, how did he know anything about her at all? Psychological profiling would later suggest Daniel fit a pattern: organized offender, a man with control issues, capable of manipulation and patience. He was never arrested, never charged. But in that quiet Oregon town, people knew. Something about Daniel didn't sit right. In 2012, nearly 29 years after Teresa vanished, an unusually dry summer revealed something no one expected. Just off a winding river trail outside Medford, Oregon, a hiker noticed bone fragments protruding from the soft earth of an eroded bank. At first, authorities assumed they were animal remains, but as forensic crews arrived, the story shifted. A partial human skull, a fragment of jawbone, and vertebrae, long buried but remarkably preserved in the shade of pine trees and sediment. Dental records couldn't be matched. DNA wasn't conclusive, but a single overlooked detail made investigators freeze. Wrapped within the decayed remains was a strip of fabric, sun-faded pink with tiny embroidered daisies. The pattern matched a blouse Teresa's mother said she'd bought for her daughter the spring before she disappeared. The blouse had never been found. Until now. The discovery was a breakthrough, emotionally devastating, yet strangely hopeful. After decades of silence, Teresa's story had surfaced, quite literally. Cadaver dogs were brought in. More bone fragments were uncovered in a 15-yard radius, and nearby, hidden beneath a mound of river rocks, a rusted bracelet engraved with one word: resilient. It was the same bracelet Teresa's best friend remembered her wearing every day, a graduation gift. The media called it a miracle, but for Teresa's parents, it wasn't closure. It was just the beginning of more questions. With human remains now officially linked to Teresa, the Medford Cold Case Unit reopened the file, and this time they brought in behavioral analysts from the FBI. One name kept resurfacing: Derrick Vaughn, Teresa's former neighbor. Back in 1983, he was 29, a quiet, awkward man who lived alone in a small RV behind his mother's house, just 2 blocks from the Peronis. He had a reputation: polite, but off. The kind of guy who didn't quite make eye contact. No one ever considered him a suspect, but that changed when detectives reviewed old statements. Teresa's diary, discovered in a storage box in 2013, included a disturbing line dated 2 weeks before she vanished. "Mr. Vaughn offered me a ride again today. I told him no. He smiled, but it gave me goosebumps." Criminal psychologists flagged this immediately. Why would a grown man repeatedly offer rides to a 17-year-old girl he barely knew? Analysts built a personality profile: socially isolated, likely harboring fantasies of control. His behavior fit what profilers call a disorganized opportunist, someone who doesn't plan meticulously but acts on impulse. When questioned in 1983, Derrick claimed he barely knew the girl. But now, the inconsistencies in his statement stood out, especially a strange line during his old interview. If she ran off, she probably had her reasons. But no one had mentioned running away. That comment haunted investigators. Now they needed to find him. But Derrick Vaughn had disappeared. For nearly 40 years, Derrick Vaughn had simply faded away. No social security activity, no driver's license renewals, no criminal charges. He'd become a ghost. But investigators weren't giving up. In 2023, using AI-enhanced facial recognition, cold case detectives partnered with Homeland Security to run an aging composite of Derrick's 1983 DMV photo against driver's license databases nationwide. And they got a hit. Nevada, a small town outside Reno. Under the alias Dale Vickers, Derrick had been living off the grid for decades. A mechanic by trade, he kept to himself, lived in a rusted trailer, and worked part-time at a junkyard. Detectives flew out quietly. No media, no backup. Just a small tactical team and one goal. Confront the man who may have held answers to Teresa's disappearance for 40 years. They knocked. No answer. They returned the next morning with a warrant. Inside the trailer, investigators found a sparse, cluttered space. But in a locked footlocker beneath the floorboards, they uncovered a silver locket with the initials TP, a faded Oregon driver's license belonging to Derrick Vaughn, a stack of Polaroids from the early 1980s, including one of Teresa, standing outside a car she never owned. Vaughn was arrested at a diner 3 miles away. When he saw officers, he didn't run. He simply said, "I knew this day would come." At the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, Derrick Vaughn sat silently in the interrogation room, hands cuffed, gaze locked onto the wall. Detectives didn't start with accusations. They started with memory. "Do you remember Teresa Peroni?" Derrick blinked, paused, then smirked. She was always too curious for her own good. That one sentence shifted the room. From the very beginning, Derrick played a psychological game, withholding details, challenging investigators, and leaning into vagueness. He refused to confirm he knew Teresa intimately, yet used her nickname, Terry, more than once. But it was his body language that gave him away. According to profiler Dr. Lena Moore, Derrick's behavior aligns with narcissistic traits, deflective, manipulative, and riddled with micro-expressions of guilt. When shown the Polaroids, his demeanor changed. His smirk dropped. He asked for a lawyer, but it was too late. DNA on the locket matched Teresa's mother's mitochondrial profile, and fibers found in Derrick's trailer matched carpet samples from Teresa's dorm room, a carpet that had been replaced 39 years earlier, yet preserved in storage by university maintenance records. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough. Police now believed Derrick had lured Teresa under false pretenses, driven her into the forest, and ended her life, all before disappearing into decades of obscurity. In February 2025, Derrick Vaughn was officially charged with the 1983 murder of Teresa Peroni, nearly 42 years after her disappearance. His arraignment was brief. He pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors presented the DNA evidence, the matching carpet fibers, and the disturbing behavior from the interrogation. The Polaroids were ruled admissible. A trial was set for September 2025, but this is where the case gets strange again. 2 months later, Vaughn's public defender filed a motion declaring him mentally unfit to stand trial. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation. The diagnosis? Borderline psychopathy with schizotypal features, a mental disorder, but not severe enough to declare him insane. Still, Vaughn's defense argued diminished responsibility, pushing for a plea deal. After weeks of closed-door negotiations, a judge rejected the offer, citing the public's right to closure. But here's what haunts people most. Teresa's full remains were never found. The exact cause of death remains unknown. And Vaughn? He never confessed. In the words of Judge Alicia Rayner, "Justice may be served in the eyes of the law, but it will never fill the silence left behind." Today, Teresa's family continues to advocate for cold case reform. Her brother, now in his 60s, visits the creek every year on April 17th, the day she vanished, and leaves a note beneath the old pine tree. It always says the same thing: "You are not forgotten." What do you think really happened in those woods that night in 1983? Was justice truly served? Or did Derrick Vaughn take secrets to the grave? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if these kinds of mysteries keep you up at night, subscribe to Confessions and Cold Cases, where silence meets the truth.